This next session I'm going to introduce is a fireside chat with none other than Gordon Little. He is he's been here all day, but Gordon is our policy lead at Blockchain Australia, and he's going to be having a conversation with Daniel Buchner from Block, and they're going to be talking about transforming digital identity on a global scale, leveraging decentralized systems and blockchain technology to build innovative solutions. So take it away, Gordon. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Amy Rose. Hi, Daniel.
Hey there. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yep, we got you. Great. Okay. So first of all, I just want to thank Daniel for joining us. He's coming, I believe, from Washington, D.C. Is that right?
No, actually, I prior lived in Washington State, but now I'm actually in Austin, Texas.
Oh, Austin. Okay. Down there with Tesla and a few others now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Austin?
Yeah.
Austin,
Same area.
The hot spot for tech and innovation now. So look, what I was hoping, and I know we didn't catch up before, but what I'd like to do is just maybe everyone here is interested in what you guys are doing, and the way the sessions have gone this morning. Obviously, identity is a big part of cybersecurity, and so maybe you can just give a little bit of your background of what you're doing at Block right now around decentralized identity and how you think about that as a product or a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Block, we're out of the TBD organization of Block. We are currently working on, building out some decentralized identity systems for purposes like, decentralized monetary exchange and things of that nature. But the core of the decentralized identity work is really, generalized. It's enabling more people to sort of access this technology where they own their own IDs. They can, get credentials that are, prove certain things about them. This is work that I started at Microsoft, and that is, it's critical. I think it's going to be adopted, across the world shortly, because it's in essence, I think as an organization, you should think about it as the same thing that happened when email went from paper mail to digital mail. And I don't think we're going to sit here for, the next 50 years and everything about, our lives is going to be digitized, but somehow miraculously, the things we use to prove who we are or our diploma are all just going to stay paper. I mean, it's sort of it just seems funny, right? When you think about it, like, maybe we're zooming around on a starship in 2300, Picard's next to us, and everything's digitized, and we can, get food out of our little, our little materializer, but we're still using paper credentials. I mean, it'd just be kind of a funny show. So I think that this is going to happen, and Block is really on board for its own reasons. Like, it wants to see it happen because things like KYC proofs and, all sorts of other digital things that we have to deal with as a business get better, right? Especially if you have things like reusable KYC, reusable proofs that are currently silo locked. So we're investing in it almost as an enabling technology, like someone's got to help put up the telephone poles, and that's stuff that Microsoft's doing. And I know Australia has some digital identity stuff going on there too. But that's the reason we're doing it, and we're just kind of one company out of many. I mean, I guess we're bigger than certain other companies, but we're one of many that's pushing all of this stuff forward, whether it's DIDs or verifiable credentials or self-custody of personal data.
So really, we're talking about self-sovereign ID here at some level, where you control your own data and make it available. So you guys are looking, then somebody else will have run that, and you'll have to connect all those to make your ecosystem work. Is that, or are you going to have a self-sovereign product yourselves, or how are you?
Yeah. So if I was going to be specific about exactly what we'll put out there, we don't want to have something one-off. We're trying to snap to all the standards that are coming out of both WC3, DIF, and places like IETF, to make sure that anything we build is either using something that already exists in the ecosystem or is something that's on the standards track. We don't have any real methods or, whether it's DIDs or credentials that are specific to Block. We're trying to create nothing that is bespoke. We want our stuff to be interoperable with every wallet out there. Today, there's numerous DID methods. There's numerous constructions of credentials. So there's a little bit of, the industry sort of needing to winnow down to, some smaller set, obviously, to be able to get larger interop. But that's something where we're placing bets on a few different interoperable methods that are, essentially like picking like the 3 or 5 we think are most likely to succeed. And we're just mostly implementing those. So the interop story for us is like, hey, we did a scan of the ecosystem and, we tried to pick the broadest set that would give us the most reach across the most other wallets or organizations that are minting credentials, for instance.
That's great.
And one, I guess the last thing I would say is in terms of what we're actually putting out, we are building currently a identity wallet on both desktop, so a desktop application. It's an Electron-based app, and then on mobile, we're starting a mobile wallet. The difference, I think, with other wallet apps out there that you see, unlike those, ours certainly does IDs. So you can log in with an ID you own, and you can get and present credentials. But we do actually have a heavy premium on personal data. So we believe that identity is more than just traditional identity or credentials you've had, like your driver's license. It's also all the data that you put in your apps. So our wallet has a personal data store in it that has data from applications as well, like decentralized apps that might store data with you instead of, say, Facebook or some centralized company. So that's a bigger piece of our wallet that a lot of other wallets, they're just not in that game. They don't kind of delve into that as much.
Oh, okay. So two questions coming from that, because I was just at a session this week with one of the ministers from New South Wales, and in Australia, we both at a federal level and a state level, they're looking at ID and building applications that allow you to access different government departments, et cetera. And clearly, even talking to them, that challenge of interoperability in the standards is a difficult one. And so you guys having to go, oh, we've got the US, we've got Australia, we've got Europe, we've got, like, where are you seeing the thought leaders come from, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's still a bit fragmented. I think there's things like the OpenID Connect scheme for issuing and presenting credentials is one that's gaining some traction, even internationally. I saw recently that the EU picked it up. So, a lot of their credentials coming out of the EIDAS, for instance, are going to use that. And, that gives us some interoperability across borders. It is still very young. I mean, I think there's a lot of fragmentation. I think people have to understand that maybe they have to run into the problems, right? Like run into the problems, meaning, some government official from Australia wants to do something with maybe some folks from the USA, and they're like, well, why can't we? And they have to feel it and then kind of express that downward to their own technical staffs. And then, you start getting the motion towards something. Because right now there's 4 or 5 disparate standards for each piece of the puzzle, and we need it to converge. So I think that'll happen naturally and organically, probably over the next few years, but not right away. But yeah, Australia certainly is there, at the forefront, along with Canada, specifically British Columbia, who's always kind of been, kind of ahead of these things in many ways, and then the United States and the IDAS and a few others in Europe.
My next one is not government related, it's big tech related. So if I look around at myself, my own life, and I go, I've got this thing here that seemed to have my whole life on it. And you look at Apple, Microsoft, Google, and we'll just throw in Amazon because they've got so many people in their ecosystem. Do one of them win in terms of they're going to have the protocols and I'm going to be, or are they going to agree on a standard and that they're going to win it over the governments because they'll move faster?
Well, yeah, so it's an interesting question. And it really depends on what slice of identity you're talking about, right? Like traditional identity, I think if you ask people that have been in the identity sector, like people I worked with at Microsoft in the Azure Active Directory division, traditional identity to them is much smaller in scope. It's like that, your driver's license or like your proofs for your bank, maybe, but it's, Social Security, that sort of thing. And that will be, government will have a huge role there because obviously they are the source of many of those types of traditional identity proofs. But if you expand your definition of identity to like everything that you say and do in your interactions and digital recordings of everything that you kind of, put into the digital world, and that's kind of how we view identity, right? Like I give this analogy, if I had access to your social security number, that might tell me something like if I could correlate it with a few other points. But if I had access to like your grocery lists for the last year, right, that's actually arguably more powerful. It tells me like maybe how your health is and like things about you. So the bulk of your identity is not in things that are governmental proofs. It's mostly in things that you put into apps online. That's where most of it lives. And that's why places like Google and Facebook really like to be in front of all that data, because they get the most intimate view of who you actually are. And so from that perspective, I think governments have a huge role to play in traditional identity. There's a little bit of an interesting dynamic with some of these big companies like the Googles and Facebooks of the world, because for them, if the total scope of identity is solved, which is IDs, verifiable credentials for proofs, and then personal data stores, that last one being more critical, they could stand to lose a lot if they don't adapt their models, right? If people build apps that start storing data with people instead of a centralized server or company, that's a lot of data traffic that they no longer get access to. They don't have the ability to plumb into that data. So it's very strategic. You know, we've been talking to some of these companies, and some are handling it in healthier ways than others. You know, some are very much opposed because they want to protect their silos of data and make sure that they're still at the center. And others have like more of a progressive view of like, well, you know, maybe some of that data should reside with the user and we'll compete on experience. And I think that that's the question that certain organizations that derive, you know, 90+% of their revenue from watching user data really need to ask themselves. So some hurt more than others. Like, I don't think Amazon would be that hurt. I think, you know, you have your Googles and your Facebooks that would definitely need to ask themselves some questions, what occurs in their business model.
Yeah, because it seems to me you might get governments to agree, but at some level, but each of them, as you said, have some issues that might, or some revenue models that might make it more incentivized for them to each develop their own way. And then you, as somebody who has to interact with all of them, have got to build 4 different models, right? And
yeah, I think that, you know, the governments will probably come to alignment in many ways. I think that there's a better forcing function for credentials. So I think they'll align. If the bigs, the big part of, you know, gaining alignment with them is the ones that are willing to modify their models and kind of snap to standards, great, you know, we'll work with them. I think the transformative thing about the identity stuff that we're doing, which actually enables like decentralized apps, like I gave you the grocery list one earlier, like why can't I have a grocery list app that like writes to my personal data store that shields the data and stays with me versus going out to some server? I think you can write an app like that. And I think it's very interesting for developers to write an app that has no server, right? Like they don't have to deal with you know, IT costs and that sort of thing. So we don't need them to play ball, right? We don't need the bigs to play ball, because if developers step up and embrace this app model where data is located with the user, you know, maybe users just step away. They just say, you know, I'm gonna go to this new app and I don't need to use that app anymore that you know, spies on me, essentially.
Yeah. And just the next one of my more favorite topics lately is the word wallet. Everybody's got a wallet, and then there'll be a wallet of wallets. So just how do you think about wallets and what you're doing? And will my wallet have my crypto? Will my wallet have my identity? Like, how do you see all these different wallets in your ecosystem, or, you know, operating or not operating? Or is the word wallet the wrong word?
No, I think, you know, wallet's just the general metaphor people have. We call them agents at our, you know, for us, we can just call them user agents, kind of like a browser. I do think it shows how young we are as an industry based on the fact that wallets are not consolidated between monetary wallets and identity wallets, even though at the root of this cell phone ID is the same keys, potentially the same seed phrase, you know, and basis of cryptography that run both your digital money and digital identity. And you can just tell the ecosystems early from the fact that those are separate still, right? And I do think they'll converge. I don't think there's any reason you would, particularly as a user, want to have separate management of the same key set over 2 different apps. It's essentially doing many of the same functions. And today we, you know, even the physical, you know, analogy, like we have our wallet, it's got identity data in it, and it also has money. And I think that's where things are going to end up at, you know, over the long scheme of time, maybe 2-3 years from now.
Yeah. Okay. And are you guys actually building in a blockchain environment? Or are you building outside of it so you can talk to it, or to the various
identity is something where, you know, particularly like we don't think hardly anything should be on chain, to be quite honest with you. As little as possible. If we could avoid a blockchain entirely, we would. We do use DID methods that actually are anchored. The only one we use that touches a blockchain is anchored in Bitcoin. It's called Ion. It's something that was developed at Microsoft with a bunch of other companies out in the open in diff. So in that respect, yeah, our DID stuff does actually have some touch point, specifically to Bitcoin, but it's very light. It's small but important. The rest of it is completely outside of anything to do with the blockchain, whether it's the proofs and credentials that you create or the personal data. We certainly don't put that on anywhere near a blockchain. We think blockchain is very limited utility, but important, and as small as we can make it.
Great. Okay. I just want one final thing to let you leave with a final statement there, but we're out of time. Just so though, for the developers in Australia and our members of Blockchain Australia who might over time be interacting with with Block and your ecosystem, what should they be thinking about how they do that? And
yeah, so this spring we'll actually have some SDKs, all open source, all standards based, that tie together the ID portions, the DID portions, verifiable credentials, and personal data sort of into one easy to use thing. That's certainly something you could pick up as a developer if you so desire. We also have like these service packages. If you're an issuer of credentials, we're trying really hard to come out with one that supports all the various verifiable credential standards, has plugins for different DID methods that you can run open source and service your business as well. And none of these things accrue direct monetary value at all to Block. We're just providing these because we think they need to exist. We'll be using it for our own devices, but certainly encourage everyone else to. We're trying to paper over some of those rough patches where we need convergence with open source software that we're putting out.
that's great. Okay. Well, thank you, Daniel. It's been great to get the update from you guys. It's certainly been, if you get this chance to see some of the stuff we'll be posting online from the earlier sessions about cybercrime and the rest of it that have been really quite interesting this morning, as people work through a whole range of sophisticated scams and things that are now happening in the ecosystem that we're all, but thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.